So let's talk about this incredible paradox that's sitting right at the heart of China's economy. On one hand, you have this absolutely world-class, futuristic physical infrastructure. But on the other, you have these almost ancient-feeling operating systems that are trying to run the whole show. And that mismatch, it's causing some huge problems. Okay, here's the best way to think about it. Imagine you've gone out and built the most powerful supercomputer the world has ever seen. That's the hardware on the left. But then you try to run it on, I don't know, Windows 95. That's the software on the right. You can see how that just doesn't work. And that massive gap between the incredible hardware and the old school software is what's really holding back China's potential. So, before we get into the problems, you really have to appreciate the sheer scale of what China has actually built. I mean, we're talking about a story of unprecedented size and speed. The numbers here are just, well, they're kind of mind-boggling. Let's just start with electricity. China's total power capacity is a massive 3.35 billion kilowatts. To put that in perspective, the amount they add in a single year is often more than the entire grid of some developed countries. It's just a system on an absolutely epic scale. And here's what's really wild. For the very first time in history, the amount of power they can generate from wind and solar has actually surpassed their coal power capacity. We're talking 1.4 billion kilowatts of renewable energy. They've literally built the world's biggest green energy arsenal. So you've got all this power, but how do you move it from the sunny, windy west to the big industrial cities in the east? Well, you build this, the world's most advanced ultra-high voltage supergrid. It is an absolute engineering marvel, basically a superhighway for electricity that can zip huge amounts of energy across a continent with almost no waste. And it's not just the physical stuff, right? This dominance shows up in the digital world, too. They have the world's biggest 5G network, massive cloud computing infrastructure, and AI is everywhere. The hardware, both physical and digital, is absolutely cutting-edge 21st century. But here's where the story takes a turn. All of this incredible futuristic hardware is running smack into a wall made of an outdated operating system. The potential is enormous, but it's getting trapped by these deep, systemic bottlenecks. Okay, let's look at the company level first. A huge problem, especially in those giant state-owned companies, is something called data silos. The easiest way to picture this is to think of every department, finance, logistics, sales, using its own separate, locked-down spreadsheet. Nobody's spreadsheet talks to anyone else's, so no one can see the whole picture, and it just cripples good decision-making. And this leads to this really powerful dilemma, which is perfectly captured by this quote. It basically says, you can't find a new continent with an old map. And that's exactly what's happening. Companies are trying to navigate this new, complex digital world, but they're using maps from a completely different era. You're just not going to get where you need to go. And this isn't just a problem inside of companies. The exact same silo problem exists at the national level, right inside that amazing supergrid we were just talking about. Physically, all the wires are connected. But in terms of the rules and how it operates, it's not one grid. It's more like a collection of isolated provincial islands that barely talk to each other. And the result of these islands is just staggering waste. Get this, at its peak, the windy province of Gansu was forced to just throw away 43% of its clean wind power. Just gone. And why? It wasn't because the power lines weren't there. It was because the software, the market rules, couldn't figure out how to get that power from Gansu to a city that desperately needed it. Now here's the root cause. The grid software doesn't run on what's cheapest. See, the global standard is something called economic dispatch, which is pretty simple. You use the cheapest power available first. But China's legacy system is based on an old idea of fairness, making sure all the power plants get a turn to run, even if they're super expensive or dirty. And that means you have situations where perfectly good, free wind energy is being thrown away, while a polluting coal plant next door is forced to keep running. It makes no sense. So what's the solution? This is the key takeaway. It's not about building more wind turbines or more power lines. It's about designing a totally new software layer, a whole new operating system, to actually manage all that amazing hardware they've already built. At the corporate level, this means a huge shift. You have to move away from those old, rigid systems that are really just good at recording what happened yesterday and move towards something new. A lot of people call it an ontology. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but all you need to know is that it's like creating a living, breathing digital twin of your entire company, one that's built from the ground up for AI and smart decisions. And this new OS basically works in 3 layers. First, it builds a single map of everything the company is, all its assets, all its people. Then, it maps out everything the company does, all the processes and workflows. And then, and this is the magic part, it allows you to see what the company can do. You can run simulations, ask, what if we do this or that, and find the absolute best strategy before you ever spend a dime in the real world. Okay, I know this still might sound a little bit abstract and theoretical, but when companies actually put this new kind of software into practice, the real world dollars and cents impact is, well, it's pretty incredible. I mean, just look at these results. Airbus used this approach and boosted the production efficiency of its A350 jet by over 30%. BP managed to find an extra 30,000 barrels of oil a day. And Tyson Foods, they created $200 million in new value in just 2 years. So this isn't some far-off idea. This is a proven way to unlock massive efficiency. All right, so if this works so well for huge companies, what happens if we apply the exact same thinking back to China's power grid? It needs the exact same OS upgrade. It has to go from being a bunch of fragmented provincial islands to being one truly unified national market, just like the ones that work so well in Europe and the US. In the beating heart of this new national OS is a dynamic pricing system. A key part of that is called locational marginal pricing, or LMP. All it means is that the price of electricity changes constantly, based on exactly where and when you are on the grid. It sends a sharp, clear economic signal that tells everyone where power is cheap and where it's expensive, allowing the whole grid to automatically optimize itself and get rid of that terrible waste. So when you put this all together, what you're seeing is the beginning of a fundamental shift for China's economy. The era of just building more stuff, of just focusing on the hardware, that's coming to an end. The next great challenge, and it's a much harder one, is making all those things finally work together. And let's be clear, this is not a technology problem anymore. They have the tech. This is a systems problem. It's about reforming the really deep, entrenched rules, the competing incentives between provinces, and the whole governance structure that runs the economy. It's a much bigger, much messier challenge. And the stakes here could not be higher. Getting this software layer right is the key to pretty much everything, unlocking productivity for the future, actually hitting their ambitious climate goals, making their supply chains more secure, and really determining what their economic power will look like for the next few decades. Which leaves us with this final, really big question. For decades, China has proven to the world that it is the undisputed master of building things. But the challenge for its next chapter is to prove it can master the infinitely more complex art of making them all work together.